This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Most of you aren't just listening right now, you're driving, cleaning, and even exercising. But what if you could be saving money by switching to Progressive? Drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Multitask right now. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
What's up, everybody? It's ImmaLetYouFinish. It is show number 146, and we have a special guest today. Amy?
No, I'm not the special guest. I'm here every goddamn week. Well, it's about time you realized I'm special, Courtney.
Sometimes.
No, we have writer, author, critic, real professor, unlike me, who they call him professor. She actually has a doctorate. Kim Mack, who has written a brand new book as part of the 33 and a third series called Time's Up. And it's about Living Color's sophomore record, Time's Up. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, please. We are. I had known of Kim's work, but did not meet her until a while back when PopCon was in town, a conference which everyone I know attends, and my issues with self-esteem come into play, so I never go because I'm like, they're using big words to talk about stupid music. I'm not. But I don't really know what zeitgeist means. But Kim, let's just jump right into the book. So why don't you just kind of explain what led you to wanting to write this book and why for 33 and a third, that series, if you want to give a little background on that, and then just talk about what led you into writing this book.
Yeah, so, I've always been an admirer of the 33 and the third series. I discovered it, I believe it was sometime maybe in 2005 or 6. And as soon as I saw it, it was actually at PopCon when I first saw it. And it was one, yeah, right, definitely a PopCon. But as soon as I saw the books, they just looked amazing. And I opened one up and I just couldn't believe, it just seemed like a perfect idea, the marrying of words and sounds, which is really what I do and in my wheelhouse. So yeah, as soon as I saw them, I just wanted to write one, and it was kind of on my bucket list. And many years passed, and, I moved from being somebody who wrote about music as a critic and occasionally as a journalist to somebody who ended up going to pursue a doctorate. And then it just took all of those years for me to finally try to write one. So in 2014, when I was finishing up my PhD at UCLA, my PhD's in English, when I was finishing that up, I submitted a proposal, and I was able to talk to Corey Glover, who's the lead singer for Living Color, and Vernon Reed, the guitar player. They were kind enough and generous enough to talk to me for this proposal, for this thing that I wanted to write. And, so I wrote the proposal, I sent it in, I thought it was really good, I was excited, I was hopeful, and then it was rejected. And so that was 2014, and I was disappointed.
Did they tell you why? Why they rejected it?
No, they just, as some of your listeners probably know, there's the way it works is that there's this call for papers. It used to be that people would wait, just with like real excitement for this call to come out. And it could be every few years. Sometimes it wasn't on any kind of schedule. Now it seems to happen every year. But they get a lot. So for the year, well, we'll fast forward in a moment. But anyway, they get hundreds, right? Hundreds of these. So they don't respond or tell anyone why it's accepted or not accepted. Well, not why it's not accepted. Anyway, so I applied. It was rejected. I was disappointed. Vernon told me later that he was disappointed. And I texted him and I said, hey, Vernon, if I ever try again, would you still be willing to talk to me for the book? Would you still be willing to do that? And he said, absolutely. So 6 years passed, and I tried again in 2020, and I heard about it. It just wasn't on my radar. I heard about the call 2 weeks before it was due on July 1st, and I said to myself, I had a lot on my plate because I had my first book was coming out in December. I had all this stuff on my plate, but I said to myself, I'm going to text Vernon, and if he gets back to me, then that's a sign that I should pursue this because, probably not shockingly, Vernon does not get back very quickly on text. So anyway, I texted him, and I was shocked. He got back to me the same day and said, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. So I did. And I tweaked the proposal. I didn't change it much, and it was accepted.
Oh,
and so, yeah, so that was the one in 2020. And so, yeah, and Time's Up, the reason why I chose Time's Up and not Vivid, I think Vivid is probably the expected choice for this kind of series. Yeah, I mean, I think people would assume it would be Vivid. I like Vivid. I loved Cult of Personality. It was everywhere, of course. That was 88, so I was in college, my sophomore year, and I loved the song. I thought it was a great song, great riff. Still, every time I hear it, it's like, wow, that is truly an iconic riff. And I liked the record, but I didn't love it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. And but it wasn't until Time's Up that I feel like I really got a sense of what this band really was about, what they could do. I think Vivid is, kind of a very mainstream rock record and absolutely legible, to folks who love hard rock and metal, and it just had lots of hits on it. But I think Time's Up is just a little more challenging, a little more experimental. The collaborations even, having collaborations on there with folks who are not normatively associated with rock. I just think it's just this really bold, interesting record, and I like it more. And I just thought it was better.
To me, that absolutely makes sense because Time's Up is actually the more important of the two records to me, because you come out with a record like Vivid, right? You have a huge hit with that. I was in college at that time as well, and they ruled, and I'm from New York. And we all loved them. They were black rock stars from New York. And I would see Vernon. When Vernon would come in someplace, it was like a rock god was walking. Corey Glover, when we would see them, we saw them around, So it meant something. The harder thing to do is you're a black rock band in the 80s, you have mainstream success, and then you follow it up. Because at that time, people want you to make the next record that absolutely sounds like the first record. They want you to expand upon that. And they made a really different record to the first record. Mm-hmm. And that is why I think it's great that you're focusing on that album, because it's more complex. They do a lot more different stuff. And the follow-up is always the hardest after you've had that kind of mainstream success, because what the record company and what people, even show managers, want you to do is more of that. We can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that album it's a great counterpart, but it's not really more of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it is its own thing, and they really wanted to do something different. They were really clear. They didn't want to do Vivid 2. I think they may have paid a little bit for not doing Vivid 2, but they didn't want to do Vivid 2. They also wanted to expand their palette, not just sonically, but also in terms of the lyrical content. I mean, if you look at what they're writing about, they were always a political band, and that voice was sorely needed, particularly at that time in both the US, but also in New York, in particularly with race relations and everything being what they were at that specific moment. But they were known as, kind of a message band and very political. And I think this Time's Up also contained certainly songs that engaged race and class and gentrification and all these really important issues. But also they were talking about things like the environment, right? Time's Up is about climate change and the environment. And that, not a lot of people were talking about that, and particularly not like on a hardcore song, in 1990. And then they had songs about love and songs about death and grief. And, Solace of You was about living, Corey Glover's dad passed away right before they blew up. And Solace of You was about that. And that final song, This Is the Life, which is one of my favorites, is talking about embracing the life you have and what it means to walk a certain path and accepting that path. These were just like an expansion of the things that they were kind of connected to or conflated with when they came out. This is the band that talks about politics and that's it. So yeah.
You make a point, and certainly they're going to be. I mean, there's the really cliche of the sophomore slump, and it's either sometimes a slump or it's an elevation, because very often, I mean, there was a tremendous amount of pressure on these guys before. I mean, when Mick, the whole Mick Jagger connection, and I mean, all eyes were on them for so many reasons. Being black, being the first, coming out of New York, there were not a lot of bands coming out of New York at that point. New York was a hip hop place in the 80s, the late 80s. But sometimes once you have that success, I'm not saying anything that people don't know, the sophomore record almost gives you a chance, like, okay, now you know who I am. Now I'd like to do something a little different from that. What I was going to ask you is and then you make a really good point in the book, and I want to ask about how you handle this stylistically from a writing, but you make a good point that especially with black bands, black rock bands, their next one comes along and people forget. So it's Living Color, they have their moment, and then it's Rage comes along. I mean, the shelf life is a lot shorter, unfortunately.
Well, because it's treated as a novelty, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, look at this thing. This was great.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's one of the I don't know, the unfortunate things about how Living Color were received in the aftermath of that is that I think a lot of people, and not just some fans, but also some critics talked about it publicly. I think people wanted the floodgates to open. When Living Color did. I mean, this is something they don't get enough credit for, is just how groundbreaking they were. At that time. Because they really did effectively desegregate rock radio. They desegregated, rock as a genre, from an industry standpoint. And that was a huge, huge deal. And I think people hoped that there would be a ton of black rock bands that would come right after them. That didn't exactly happen. What did happen was, I think they still kind of put their foot in the door, and the door cracked open a bit. And so, then you were able to get some bands that had folks of color, rock bands that had folks of color in it, like a Soundgarden, like a Rage Against the Machine, and of course TV on the radio and others. But we still haven't had that all black rock band that has reached those
and Nirvana
heights.
And Nirvana too.
Well,
right.
But I have a theory on that I've had for a very long time, that I've seen it with a lot of different artists. I think the big mistake is black rock is never marketed to black people. They always so there's no foundation. You're not building on anything. You might build on a hit and you say, oh, let's go to rock radio. This is where I think black radio has failed black rock artists, because there's been no room. It's like, you think of all the black radio stations, nobody has except for like college radio, maybe, no one has a black rock show, right? It could be on the weekends. It could be the show that you have on at midnight, 1 a.m. There's no place you're not being marketed to. So what happens with a band like in Living Color, and I'll even use Macy Gray as a perfect example. Macy Gray came out. She had a big hit that went pop. They didn't market her to black people at all. So it's like, you have the big pop hit. So then you come with the next record, and who's the audience from it? you completely ignore the Black audience. And if you do that on a first record, it's hard to then come to Black radio and everything at the second or third record and say, here's something for you. And I think the mistake is assuming that Black people are a monolithic group. We only like R&B, we only like hip hop, when many Black people love rock music, including people who love hip hop and R&B, right? So you don't market to Black people. Then when you come with the next record, it's like, if you don't have the immediate thing that people hear as a hit, who's the audience you're going to? You didn't really build one. You built out, here's hit songs, and didn't give that group a foundation because you just think, well, they're Black and it's rock music. And when you do that, you make it shaky ground for these bands because you're not building them a real foundation. Everybody has to have the foundation to put the house on. I don't care if you're a pop or whatever. It's why you can see a lot of pop divas have a long career after the hits have stopped coming, because there's that, say, a gay audience, right? A gay audience will keep you working around the world if you have the songs, but there was an audience built for you. When you're a Black rock band, if you just say rock and then it's treated like a novelty, you haven't given anybody that foundation to build upon. And I think that was a mistake that was made with those bands at that time, thinking it's rock music. Well, we can't market it to Black people, when there's a whole segment of the Black population who came to these bands, but they weren't marketed to.
That's a fabulous point. That really is a fabulous point. I will say that the band, I think that they would have liked that. And I think they did what they could to talk directly to Black audiences. They played Showtime at the Apollo. They were on that twice. They were on that for Vivid. They were on that for Time's Up. That's when I first saw their faces. It wasn't MTV because I didn't have MTV at that time. So it was Showtime at the Apollo for me, seeing them. And I remember being very, very interested in how the crowd was going to receive them. Because I watched that show. Right. I knew what that crowd could be like. I was just like, how's this going to go? But yeah, no, I think that the band, and, they played Arsenio, obviously Arsenio was really popular, but I think they, they wanted Black fans, they wanted Black folks to come out. I can't agree with you more with what you just said.
And they were the embodiment of it, right? They're like, we're Black rock kids. We're here. We know there's a community of us out here.
Well, and also I feel like eclecticism is something that white artists can indulge in. And I'm saying indulge in a very sarcastic way. You're allowed to go outside of your lane if you're a white artist, because it's seen as creative, you're making a journey, whatever. I mean, Macy Gray, I had a friend who was signed to Epic at the same time that Macy was, and nothing in common other than being Black, and was basically told, we have a Black artist, and we have a Black artist we can get on pop radio. And the problem is Macy didn't. That one song, I Try, which is fantastic, is like her, What If God Were One of Us, Joan Osborne. It sounds nothing like the rest of the record. And then she puts out a second record and everybody's like, what is this? So I think that Black artists were never given that freedom to be musicians as opposed to being stars. Because I know Corey and Vernon, just from around, and they listen to everything. They listen to everything. And most musicians listen to everything, And it's the fact that we, I just wanted to shift for a second. The setup of the book is interesting because you sort of have it, I don't want to say divided because that makes it sound like it's like clinical, but there are interviews. You have interviews with the band, and then you have your own story and your own analysis, which is great because they kind of come together. I was going to ask you why you did it like that, and then just sort of talk about, it's so weird to me still that we're like, wow, you were a Black kid and you listened to rock music. That people still have that mentality. But why did you do the book the way you did stylistically? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, so this is just a personal book for me, and this is a band that just really was very meaningful for me. just my personal development, but also like my musical development, just a really important band. So I knew that if I was going to write this book, it wasn't just going to be about, kind of a extended album review, right? Or like an extended track by track thing. I knew I had to talk a little bit about my story. I mean, when I finished writing it, when it was at the copy edit stage, I showed it to my husband, who reads a lot of my work, and he's also just really honest. And when he was done reading it, I asked him, "Is there too much me in there?" And a little too much me in there. And he said, "No, I think it's fine." And
I don't think there's too much you in there at all. I think that the you is important, especially with a band like this, because this was a band, and I don't mean to, this is a band where the you plays in. This is a band where you're it would be like me looking at a band of women. I'd go, wow, I see myself up there. Mm-hmm. So how could you not be in it?
Yeah. And that's how I felt. And it did feel natural to have this chapter that would focus on my journey with being a Black kid. And and it was the 70s. I grew up in the 70s, came of age in the 80s, and of course this band emerged in the late 80s. And as seen by through all of the coverage, the reception of the record, race and genre is a big deal. I mean, it still is a big deal. I mean, we have reaction videos now where we've got Black folks listening to rock for the first time and it being entertainment. It's so bizarre, But
I know. You're talking about those two kids who go, "Oh my God!" I hate those. I don't believe them. I think they're.
Well, actually, I do. You want to know why?
I
will tell you why I believe them, because they didn't grow up listening to radio like we did. So everybody has a targeted playlist and targeted things that they're listening to. And our generation, like you, grew up in the 70s, come of age in the 80s. You put on the radio and you would hear everything. We would hear pop, rock, all on the same station. And they don't get that at all.
No, it's not. I know that. I'm just saying
and things that seem
treated
obvious,
treated like a freak show. That's why I don't like it.
Yeah, but everything now is entertainment, right? Just the reaction and the discovery video. The more you can give, oh my God, the more eyes view your channel. So now it's tied into a whole other process of voyeurism and look over here, send me likes, But I love the people that are just discovering the music, because to me, I want them to
better music.
Well,
really, you're discovering Phil Collins? Great. All right.
Well, listen, Phil Collins isn't the worst, but the thing is, these kids are walking around with computers. These kids are walking around with computers in their pocket and don't know the access to some of the great, 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 great music that's been out for years.
I wouldn't start with Phil Collins.
Well, one thing I will say about those twins, by the way, I actually did a little bit, not a deep dive, but a slight bit of research on them, is that they actually grew up without popular music at all, because they grew up in a really religious family, is my understanding. Right. So they actually did not have any exposure, I don't think, to any popular music. But, there are other folks who are older and who have had different experiences. And there's this whole kind of industry now, like
of cashing in on it.
Cashing in on, okay.
Reactions, right.
Yeah, even stuff like, I forget, there was one person called, I forget what he called, but you'll see things like Black man listens to rock for the first time. It's like, oh, come on. It's just
really,
it's like, sir,
not
sir,
really,
sir.
Woman figures out how to open doors.
Right. It's like you're doing too much, sir. You are doing too much.
I will say something really funny. In high school, I'm older than you guys. In high school, I was in high school in the 70s, and this is so. My boyfriend, who was Black, literally would go, "Oh my God, the average white band, man, they're like, He did not believe. I said, "What?" He thought they were Black, and I said, "Why do you think they're called the average white band?"
That's great.
Average white band. And that's also the other thing too. Is like from my vast experience of nothing, I've always found. well, especially I guess in my writing career, that Black audiences are way more open-minded to stuff than a rock. I don't think it would even you can go down the list of artists that had as much acceptance among Black fan base, and you won't see a counterbalance with that. With ask the average white person, name me a Luther Vandross song.
Mm-hmm.
Name me unless you were in the punk scene, name me a Bad Brain song, anything. Ugh. But a Black audience would know certain artists, and maybe that's just because marketing or whatever. But I always found that. Who did you grow up listening to?
Yeah, so I had a mom who was really into rock music, and she's the one who influenced me. And so at first it was, what she was listening to. I didn't have an older sibling who introduced me or friends at school. It was her. So she would bring home, it was 70s, right? So she would bring home the Sex Pistols. She brought home Nevermind the Bollocks. She brought home, she did. She brought home Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Damn the Torpedoes. She brought home Devo, Freedom of Choice. She brought home Pat Benatar, Thin Lizzy stuff, Boomtown Rats stuff.
Talk about
the Boomtown Rats.
Talk about a Black rock. Talk about somebody who has never really gotten his due is Phil Lynott.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, what a spectacular performer. What an incredible writer. He was the whole package.
And the story too. I mean, I'm kind of he screams out for biopic, and I hate biopics, but he screams out for biopic,
So there's a really wonderful, because I'm kind of a like really into Ireland. So there's and there's a reason for that. So U2 was also really early favorite. That was a little later, when I started discovering my own music. But yeah, there's an Irish documentary on Phil Lynott that's really, really great.
Okay. I'll have to find it.
It's really good. It's really good. Yeah. But yeah, I still to this day am a big fan of him personally and Thin Lizzy, and very important person. So then later when I started to develop my own interests, it was Blondie and Cheap Trick, and eventually later U2. I had a Doors phase. Elvis Costello, and then I was very disheartened, and I don't talk about this in the book, but yeah, when I was there with the whole when he called Ray Charles the N-word, and that all got out in the press, and
we boycotted him. We like it made a difference, but I lived in San Francisco. No, we just said we loved him. We used to have little punk rock new wave dance parties, and we'd all have the latest record and we all loved him. And then when he said that, it was like he's dead to us. And it took me a long time to come back, and now he's taken Oliver's army off of armed forces. I don't know. He was dead to us. We were in Rock Against Racism in San Francisco. We were going to change the world, and nothing happened.
But that's the kind of stuff that I think, that's the kind of stuff that artists and radio and MTV and all kinds of things don't think about. And this comes back to this conversation about marketing to Black kids. I don't, obviously Elvis Costello, whatever that was all about, he's given explanations over the years, but he really wasn't thinking that there might be some Black kids who like him, right? Who might be offended. That was tough. That was one of those things I had to kind of figure out how to negotiate. And it was confusing, and it was also really disheartening.
Well, it's also Eric Clapton, just being, as far as I'm concerned, racist.
Do you realize that's why I don't play Elvis? To this day, I still don't play Elvis Costello records.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just being a racist, but and especially it's even worse with Clapton because he has his entire career on the backs of Black musicians.
Oh yeah.
He's got no excuse. The "I was a junkie" excuse doesn't work, but that's what you are.
Yeah.
Do you think how much of an impact? Or just what are your feelings about the whole Afro punk, what it was and what it is now? Because it's very different what it is now. But were you engaged
in it? The festival in Brooklyn? when it used to be free
No,
and it
the
was
whole
black. Oh, I was about to say it
no,
was black. It
the
used to be
whole
black
movement.
rock and punk bands
Right,
before it
right.
became big names. That I'm like, does this have anything to do with
No,
punk? It's like,
no,
okay.
it used to be in the parking lot
Yep.
at BAM or at Fort Greene Park, you know, with the dirt bombs and people like that playing. But I'm just curious what you think, because that's always kind of, it's almost replaced in people's mind the whole BRC in terms of a moment. I'm just wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, so no, that's a good question, and I feel like so I gave a talk with Lena Dawes. You're all, I'm sure, familiar with Lena Dawes, and this is one of her favorite topics, and I get her righteous anger, and I share it. But yeah, I loved that film. When I saw the film, when I saw the documentary, it spoke to me, of course, and I could see myself in those young folks. And yeah, it isn't what it was. It is unfortunate, but I think, this is what happens with everything. Like, everything gets commodified. Whenever it's clear that there's a chance for money to be made, this is what happens. And unfortunately, with something like this, where so much of it was about community, the spirit was about community and finding a place, and and being able to be in spaces that felt safe. That is really particularly unfortunate,
Especially since, just from my experience, I lived in California from 76 to 80 and then came back to New York, and I was very involved in the hardcore punk scene here. Don't even ask me why. And involved in the punk scene in San Francisco. And it was, as scenes could go, there were a lot of black kids hanging out. There weren't a ton. And then certainly the Bad Brains blew it wide open.
Yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to see them perform?
No, I never did. And, and that's one of the things too. So Living Color, so this is like, 1990, when I heard Time's Up, was important in a lot of ways. I liked the way the music sounded, but also it was like heavier and a little edgier than what I had been listening to up to that point. I was always into rock, and I liked hard rock. I loved Van Halen. I loved, other bands, but I had never been into hardcore at all. And again, they're not a hardcore band, but that song is, and it really just, woke my ass up and spoke to all of that kind of emotion that I had inside of me and all of that anger that I had inside of me. And then it kind of did help me it was like a bridge to other stuff. And then I got interested in other kind of heavier stuff. I got interested in across subgenres of rock. So I got into Metallica, and I got into, all of the like 90s bands like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and I was into Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that. I got a little more into Suicidal Tendencies and stuff, but that I feel like Time's Up and Living Color actually not only was exciting because they looked like me and because they were fucking great, but also they were a bridge to like slightly edgier, harder music. For me.
Well, that would have been the bands, and again, because those guys are about my age, maybe. Well, Vernon and I think, are the same age, and Corey might be a little young. Those were the bands they would have been seeing. They would have gone, because you could see the Bad Brains like at like a shopping, no, not even shop, a bodega down the street. You just would have seen those guys. You weren't missing anything with the hardcore scene. Let me just say, some of it was really great, but it was not a great place to be a girl. I will say that it was a little aggressive, but there was some great, and Bad Brains I almost put in a whole nother category because they did everything. They did and they could also play. Musicianship was not top of the list for a lot of, and that's the thing about Living Color too. I think they brought such a legitimacy. Because Vernon was already like established through Defunct and everything as a major talent.
Vernon's a rock god, and when Vernon used to listen, when we would see them in places in New York and just around town, it always felt like you were in the presence of a rock god. And on
He's
that,
a great guy.
he is. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
podcast listeners. Christian Swain here to tell you more about my experience with Raycon earbuds. Our family now has 3 pairs of Raycon earbuds around the house, and my wife just grabbed a pair of the Headphone Pros to replace some headphones from a company that was double the price. And yes, she loves them. Now, if you haven't pulled the trigger on a pair of Raycons, or even if you have, but you're in the market for another pair because they're just that good, well, now is the time to check them out, because they just launched their upgraded model of the best-selling everyday earbuds. With Raycon's upgraded everyday earbuds, now you also get active noise cancellation, ergonomic design, and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. New quick charge function, 3 customizable sound styles, plus awareness mode. Available in a variety of vibrant new colors to complement any and all skin tones. I even have a pair of earbuds in a cool green color. I have tried just about every earbud known to humankind, and these Raycons are fantastic. Seriously, if you've been wanting to check out Raycons, there truly is no better time. You're going to ask yourself why you didn't check them out sooner, and Raycon offers a 30-day happiness guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Go to buyraycon.com/Pantheon today to get 20% off your Raycon order, plus free shipping. That's right, you'll get 20% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/Pantheon. buyraycon.com/Pantheon.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to me talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
And we're back. So, Kim, I really want to go back to Time's Up, because I really think people should go back and give that album a full respin. And anybody who hasn't heard it, I really think you should listen to it now. Why do you think it really sounds so fresh? That album was made in 1990, but when I listen to that record, it could have been made this year. What is it about that album in particular that you think helps it stand up so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good question. In terms of the sounds, I think just the movement between these different kind of categories of music. I hate calling them genres. I mean, I know they're called genres, but my kind of music historian part of me always wants to push back on that, because of course genres are made up, right? They're marketing categories. They were made up a long time ago. They were just used to kind of market it to different people, and particularly Black and white people at a certain point in our history. So, but I'll just call them like categories or sounds or whatever. Time's Up has so many of those different sounds and categories of music. And then even in the same song. And I think that's something that you hear more now, right? I mean, I think that's something that you hear more now than you did then. So I think that's something that makes that record unique. And then just in terms of the lyrics, unfortunately, so many of the things that they were talking about
Are
then
still relevant today.
are still more than relevant today. Um, it is sad, but it is true that you listen to Pride, and it's just like, oh my goodness, not only is it still making a comment on these kind of you know short-sighted ideas about race and genre, but it's don't ask me why I play this music, but also this whole idea of history being a lie that they teach you in school.
Right.
And it really kind of, is so present with just all of these moral panics around, you know, books
Everything.
and everything.
Anything other,
Everything.
is right now where it's a threat to the world.
Yeah, it is
Right.
amazing. And then, information overload, right? Which is kind of predicting the chaos of social media and the internet and all of that, and then of course, as we were talking about, Time's Up and just sounding the alarm about the environment, and here we are. And so I just think it sounds uh, sonically present and contemporary and current, because of all of these meldings of different categories and sounds, but also just the lyrical content. It just really, it could have been written by a band that just emerged last year.
I feel like when you're and on one hand, you can say, what does it matter where people are ranked or where people are thought of? But I feel like Living Color always gets forgotten when listing the band. And I don't know if that's just the marketplace, if that's just people's attention span, it's just that the venues got smaller. But I just feel like it's they're almost a footnote in a way, and that's kind of, or they're symbolic. And I always, I mean, what do you think about? I'll ask you since you're the um, this is your lane.
Yeah, I mean, so when I started writing this, one of the things, and I thought this too, and I was thinking in these similar ways about them being kind of underrated. And I mean, you hear that whenever you go, whatever, you just go to YouTube and look at any video and you look at the comments, and people, I mean, this band is beloved, but people are always like, oh, they're so underrated. And um, and so when I started doing the research and reading all of the reviews and thinking about kind of their um, critical and kind of commercial reception, in their time, they were not underrated at all. I mean, people really did see what they were, even through all of the noise of the conversation around race. There wasn't a single writer who didn't see, their great, vast potential. And many, many writers compared them favorably and even felt like they were better than bands like Led Zeppelin, or Van Halen or whatever. Um, I think they're better than Led Zeppelin. I love Led Zeppelin, by the way. I say that as someone who loves Led Zeppelin, but I think they're more interesting than Led Zeppelin. But,
Okay, I'll give oh, okay, all right.
Do you think some of their success was rocky because they broke up? They started to have issues about maybe because when you're not having success at a certain level, that can bring turmoil inside of a band. And then they had someone leave, then they kind of broke up, then they did break up, then they got back together, and that can also that can kind of take a toll as well.
Yeah. So yes, and I will answer that. So I think that they were really embraced warmly, like when they appeared, and they had the kind of success that bands can just dream about, back-to-back Grammys and millions of records sold. And, the first record really well reviewed, the second record almost universally, completely well reviewed. And then they took this chance. As Vernon puts it, it was the blackest record they ever made, Time's Up, and then, I think Muzz leaving, and then one more record with Stain, with Doug Wimbish, and then breaking up. I do think that certainly, kind of derailed some of that momentum. You know, they broke up for like 7 years. That's a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but I also think that what happened was, again, not that they were underrated in their moment, because they were not underrated in their moment. People saw their greatness. But I think just following up with a record that was just not as easy to digest as Time's Up as that second record, you know, and Amy said this earlier, and I think it's true. White rock bands were given a lot more leeway at that time
Absolutely.
to, you know, to cross boundaries, musical boundaries, and to work in all of these different categories or genres.
They're celebrated for
And
it.
it's supported by their labels with it, like,
Celebrated,
you know. Yeah,
right?
sure.
And you know, I think they were punished for doing that kind of work in a second record. And so when it didn't sell as well, I just think that, you know, people just didn't stick around. I think a lot of people jumped off the bandwagon and didn't stick around to see this band continue to evolve and continue to fulfill that promise that they
And
had
this
in the
is
beginning.
also like just the beginnings of the grunge movement is starting to come out now.
Yeah,
And attention really shifted
Yes.
for good, bad, and indifferent because I mean that was a game changer right there. So rock and capital R rock and roll suddenly became like anathema to people, and they were looking at this kid in, you know.
I think that's true.
You know,
Yeah.
because I think Soundgarden gets overlooked a lot, to be honest with you, and they predate grunge. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think Sacrilege, they may be the better band between them and Nirvana was great, obviously, but I think that a lot of these bands got lost when this tornado came and just wiped everything out. Who do you listen to now? I'm just of any kind of I won't say genre. I almost said it. Category. I almost said it. I won't say it. Who are you listening to now?
Let's see. Who do I like? I like. So I'm a big fan of Rhiannon Giddens. You know, for like a lot of reasons.
I really, yeah. She's
I
really
really
talented.
I really just love her music, and I also just like her. You know, she's a storyteller, right?
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that about her. I like Anderson .Paak. I think Anderson .Paak is really cool.
Yeah,
He's
interesting.
Yeah, super interesting artist. I definitely really enjoy Jack White, which won't be a surprise to anyone because I wrote a whole book that has his name in the title. You know, there's a chapter on him in my first book. Who else am I listening to that's like very, very current? My mind is, of course, going blank right now.
No, it's all right.
yeah.
That's why I listen to the same three artists over and over again. It makes it just so much easier for me. I just go, yeah, I'm listening to the same three people. We can have our White Stripes conversation off camera because I don't get it.
See, that's why
You don't get the White Stripes? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, that's why I just stay in my
I don't get it.
my dancey divas with questionable
get it.
vocals but high production value phase.
I
It's
could
just
not be
easily-
happier when they didn't get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not that that's a beat, but I was like, oh, good, there is some pity. I'm not alone in the not getting it. You know.
But people were really mean about Meg White's drum playing. I thought that was a
No,
little unfair
she's the one that I get. It's him I don't get.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you get her but not him? Yeah, no, we definitely need to talk about that.
Yeah,
we need to have a conversation about the White Stripes.
I don't get it. I'm sorry. It's all right. I don't get the Strokes either.
Okay.
I don't get Interpol.
2000.
Well, listen, I don't get
New York.
I don't get New York. I don't get New York at that point in my
I don't
life.
get the Smiths. To this day, I do not understand the Smiths. I do not understand people's obsession with the Smiths.
No, can I just tell you, I had a revelation about the Smiths.
Understand.
No, I had a revelation the other day about Smiths with Andy Wark.
Or the Cure. I don't get the Cure either. if I can be honest
okay.
with
Let me
you.
explain it. Here's my revelation about the Smiths. At the time when the Smiths came out, I was not in college. I didn't go to college. I didn't have the college music vibe thing going on. I was just wrapping up my years in the trenches of punk rock. I wanted to hear no white people singing at me at all. Leave me alone. And watching all these clips, I realized it's Morrissey I don't like. The band themselves are I just don't like him. I don't like his voice. The Cure I didn't get until I saw them at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, and I'm not a fan. And I went, holy crap, they're incredible live. But I don't get them either.
Wow.
I don't get it.
I don't even know what to say right now. I'm speechless.
It's quite right. I don't get them.
Sorry.
I could give you more of a
And
list
I like
of people.
every day, but I'm like,
no, I could give you a list. I could
in
do an
college
entire,
when everybody was going
No.
through their Smiths moment. I was
no,
like,
I would,
yeah,
but I
okay,
wasn't
that's
in
fine.
college until 2010. So by then, I could give you a list of people I don't get. I mean, of all different categories. I mean, how long do you have? I mean,
I mean, the Smiths, I understand because of Morrissey's affect. Like, I
Oh
get
no,
that.
this has nothing to do
Yeah.
with that. That shit is terrible. It's terrible.
No, it's a great song.
It's
His guitar.
terrible.
Hey, excuse me, Neil and Chris. Johnny Marr plays with Neil and Chris and Brian Ferry, so he's a great guitar player.
Well,
They're great
yeah.
musicians.
Well, Johnny Marr is great. He's a great musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not my be all and end all, but I just don't get. Yeah, we'll have that conversation because I'm telling you, there are just some people I'm like, what am I not hearing that you're hearing?
Yeah.
And
No,
it's not even. It's not even like the regulars. Like nobody gets Alicia Keys. None of us understand why she's popular. Nobody understands why Coldplay is popular. Nobody understands a lot of people.
Coldplay is a mystery to me.
It's a mystery to
I do not
everybody.
understand.
It's a mystery. John Mayer is a mystery.
Oh
to
yeah,
me.
that's a mystery to me too.
All
Yeah,
right, good.
And with Morrissey, I mean like more like his, his like way
Yeah,
of
no,
being
his
and
shit.
aesthetic.
Yeah, all
Yes,
that stuff.
but the Cure, I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't get it either.
No, I don't understand why you don't understand. I
No,
understand.
they're overrated. They're overrated.
I heard because when they first came out, I mean, I like those early stuff, and then I just but when I saw them perform, no, seriously, when I saw them perform, I suddenly went, "Oh my God, now I get it." But on
I mean, I love Roxy music.
but that's different. Roxy music
It's
is
very
like,
different. It's
very different.
Yeah, it's very
I'm
different.
64. That music hit at a time in my life where I was already formed. You know what I mean? So it's not like, I remember Killing an Arab coming out in the 70s, whatever. It just doesn't mean anything to me. Where certain bands did change my life. Sex Pistols changed my life, in the Clash. The first class, I don't know what to tell you, Kim. We'll have to meet up and I'll tell you.
No, that's fine.
What's wrong with me? I don't know.
Let me ask you about Kate Bush. Are you happy about Kate Bush?
I love Kate Bush.
Very.
I've loved
very.
Kate Bush from album one, the very first time I heard her voice. I love anybody who she just has her own energy, her own thing. No one sounds like that. No one's voice will ever sound like that. And that uniqueness of her voice from the very, very first time I heard it was like, I'm into this. It's why I love Grace Jones. It's like, it's not because you think of Grace Jones to be the most technically proficient singer ever, but no one's going to sound like Grace Jones. No one's going to deliver that song. Like even when she does covers of other people's songs, she's made them her own. It's just a very unique individual energy. And that's why I really like her. That's why I like Kate. Yeah.
I'm not even like a huge Kate Bush fan. I like Kate Bush though for what she represents in a lot of ways. I mean, I do. Listen, one of my favorite guitar players is Johnny Thunders. He couldn't play his way out of a paper bag, for Christ's sake. The ability to actually, I mean, we all suffered through the first couple of times Mary J. Blige played in concert. It was painful, I could listen to her sing. I could listen to that woman sing the phone book. I could listen to that. I would rather hear Mary J. Blige than any technically great singer because she feels it. But I don't know. I love Mary. No, but yeah, Kate Bush, I'm very happy. I'm very happy whenever women get into that boys club. I'm very happy. I'm very happy about short of, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a woman who would get in that I would just run screaming in the opposite door. I don't want to say anything about that.
You have to support women. I will tell you, like my good friend Pia Zadora told me, keep your head up, Courtney. Keep your head up. And I said, thank you, Pia. Thank you.
That's great.
You have no idea. That's going to be Courtney's 33 and a third. Except
I'm
that
the only one.
it'll only be a third.
I feel like I'm the only one who has all her albums and can talk about them.
I don't know. I don't know if you want that on your resume.
Listen, Pia is a legend and an icon.
Yeah. And on that note, Courtney, he's grabbing the albums out of his.
Wait, I'm trying to say, where's my section with Pia? He's got them over here somewhere.
He's got him. I know. He's going to hold them up.
I don't have my Pia right next to me, but I do have another icon.
No, come on. That's apples and oranges. That's not even apples and oranges. That's apples and I don't know what fruit Pia would be. Not even a fruit.
Pia is a nice mandarin growing on a tree full of juice and sunshine. And on that note, thank you so much, Kim. Thank you for being on our crazy, wacky show.
Kim Mack's book is called Time's Up. It's part of the Bloomsbury Academic Press 33 and a Third, which has put out hundreds of books. But
she also has, what's the title of your other books, Kim? Let's give them all the books.
Thank you. Okay, my first book is called Fictional Blues, Narrative Self-Invention from Bessie Smith to Jack White.
And there you go, kids.
Oh, that explains. All right, that explains the Jack White title. I was trying to think like what.
It's University of Massachusetts Press. It came out in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. So
which means, kids, there are books available for you to read. You like to read at the beach. We like to support authors. We like music. So thank you guys. This is ImmaLetYouFinish. You know what to do. Leave a rating. Tell a friend. Thank you for listening to us on the Pantheon Podcast Network. And we will see you next week. And happy Pride still. Bye.
It's NFL draft season, and that means it's time to start thinking about fantasy football. FantasyPoints.com features industry-leading experts and prognosticators using proprietary hand-charted data to help you score more fantasy points. FantasyPoints.com is the place to go for whatever kind of fantasy football you play. Whether you play fantasy football, daily fantasy sports, or do a little bit of everything, Fantasy Points has the meticulously researched content to guide you to victory. And why wait for the fall? Fantasy Points also covers the new spring football league, the UFL. Join the guru, John Hansen, Scott Barrett, Joe Dolan, and other massive names in the fantasy football universe with an exclusive offer. Use code Pantheon for 15% off any Fantasy Points package, including the all-in package, with access to every article, tool, and data nugget that Fantasy Points has to offer. That's FantasyPoints.com and code Pantheon for 15% off at Fantasy Points. FantasyPoints.com, code Pantheon. Score more fantasy points.